Hello, and welcome to the Talk to a Doc podcast. Today, our host, Katrin, a certified health coach and founder of Health Coaches of Kentucky, will have a conversation with a doctor about important wellness issues that can help you make a difference in your health.
Hello and welcome to the Talk to Doc podcast. Today I'm very excited to talk to Dr. Goldhammer. Dr. Alan Goldhammer is the founder of True North Health Center. It's a state-of-the-art facility that provides medical and chiropractic services, psychotherapy and counseling, as well as massage and body work. He's also director of the center's groundbreaking residential health and education program. Dr. Alan Goldhammer is one of the most pioneering and dedicated visionaries in health today. He's dedicated to helping people stuck in self-destructive cycles reclaim the ability to change their lives. Dr. Goldhammer has supervised the fasts of thousands of patients, and under his guidance, the center has become one of the premier training facilities for doctors wishing to gain a certification in supervision of therapeutic fasting. Dr. Goldhammer is currently directing a prospective study incorporating random assignment and long-term follow-up on the cost and clinical outcomes in the treatment of diabetes and high blood pressure with fasting and a health-promoting diet. So I'm very happy to talk to Dr. Goldhammer today. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So how did that happen that you became involved working with people and letting them go without food for days and even weeks?
Well, I got interested in the idea of the causes of health actually at a very young age. I had done a lot of reading. I came across books by people like Herbert Shelton, and it was very interesting to me. I had an opportunity to go to chiropractic college in the United States and later to osteopathic college in Australia. And while I was in Australia, I studied with a gentleman named Alec Burton, who ran a facility called the Arcadia Health Center that specialized in medically supervised water fasting. And I saw him utilize this approach in treating a variety of chronic diseases and was absolutely amazed that these conditions that I had been trained, really you couldn't do much for, actually recovered, and they recovered consistently and predictably. So I became very interested in that. My wife, Dr. Morano, and I returned to the United States in 1984, 30 years ago, and we opened up the True North Health Center, and we've been operating the True North Health Center since then.
Right, this is fascinating. And I have studied some of your articles and videos, and I know your definition of fasting is a complete abstinence from all substances except pure water in the environment of rest. So during fast, the body switches from burning glucose for fuel from food to converting body's fat and sometimes protein for glucose. So most people do not enjoy fasting. At least few days. So why would you suggest people do that?
Well, because it turns out that water-only fasting is the most effective way of giving the body a chance to do what it does best, which is heal itself. For example, we did a study with our colleague, Dr. T. Colin Campbell from Cornell University, where we took 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure. And of those 174 patients, 174 people were able to lower their pressure enough to eliminate the need for medication. We have an average effect size of over 60 points, a reduction of 60 points in systolic blood pressure, which is the largest effects that have ever been shown in treating high blood pressure in humans. So when it comes to treating conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes and autoimmune diseases, things like rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis and asthma, and psoriasis, these conditions respond better to fasting and a health-promoting vegan SOS-free diet than they do to the pills, potions, powders, and traditional treatment. So one reason to do it is to get well. You know, if you think about something like high blood pressure, they'll tell you that under conventional treatment, you have to take drugs for the rest of your life. Or diabetes, you'll be on the medications forever. Or conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis or lupus, you'll have to be on medications forever. And the reason that your doctor knows that you'll have to be on drugs forever is because they'll guarantee you that if you follow their advice, you'll never get well. You'll be sick the rest of your life until eventually you die either from your disease or the consequences of its treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So for those patients that have these conditions, we're able to offer an alternative approach to the restoration and maintenance of optimum health, where they can achieve health, get out of pain, eliminate debility, and not have to be dependent on expensive and dangerous medications. And they do it by doing dangerous and radical things like eating good and exercising and getting enough sleep, and when it's appropriate, medically supervised fasting.
Right, this is absolutely fascinating. Fasting could, and it doesn't cost much. Um, Fasting is something everyone can do. Does everyone should do fasting
Well,
during?
everybody does fasting. You go to bed after eating dinner and you wake up in the morning and you eat something called breakfast. And you're eating breakfast because you've broken the fast from the evening. All we're doing is extending this biological adaptation. Human beings had to be able to fast. Were it not for our ability to fast, the humans would have all died. And the reason is we have a large bulbous neuronal net at the end of our spinal column called the brain. And the brain is a huge burner of glucose. In fact, it's our largest burner of glucose. And we burn a disproportionate amount of glucose because of the nature of the size and function of our brains. So what would happen in nature is if spring came late, the humans would have all died because they wouldn't have been able to survive. However, the humans that did survive had the capacity to adapt, and that is that we can change from burning glucose to burning ketones, which are a byproduct of fat metabolism. And this is a unique biological adaptation. For example, chimpanzees don't do that. You can't go very long without eating if you're a chimpanzee because your brain keeps burning glucose. But humans have this adaptive process. And so what we've done is we've taken this natural biological adaptation and we've modified its application to where we do it instead of by force, we do it by choice. And we do it because we know that in fasting, the body has a chance to mobilize and eliminate those accumulated intermediary products of metabolism and those toxic byproducts that interfere on a cellular level with proper function. And so when you do this, health is the result. And so we know that we can help restore health with fasting, and we know we can help maintain health with a health-promoting vegan SOS-free diet. SOS, of course, stands for the International Symbol of Danger, and it also stands for added sugars, oils, and salts.
Right, and this is the type of diet the True North Health Center promotes, and I know you I've seen the book you can get on how you could use less salt or no salt at all in your cooking, which is fascinating. This is something.
We have two cookbooks. One is called the Health Promoting Cookbook, and the second one is called Bravo. And these are both vegan cookbooks, so there's no animal products used. We also don't use added oil, salt, and sugar, so it makes them rather unique. But these are simple recipes that people, even myself, can make, and they taste good, and they're health promoting.
Right. Yes, this is something everyone can learn, and I should learn too. I'm still using some salt, but I'm moving away from it. And going back to fasting, there are so many benefits for supervised water fasting, such as weight loss, and you mentioned the high blood pressure and other chronic diseases. Is there a condition which fasting would not help with?
Oh, there's many people that are maybe not good candidates for fasting. Fasting works best when the condition you're treating is the result of dietary excess. So you'll see most of the patients that we publish studies on are people that have things like high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, or they have type 2 diabetes, or they're suffering with obesity, or they have these autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases, of course, are diseases where the problem is caused by your own immune system. For example, in rheumatoid arthritis, the debilitating joint deformity and pain is actually caused by your immune cells attacking your own body. And in lupus and these other conditions, any of these autoimmune conditions, it's the same story. The body's immune system attacks the body's own tissues. And we believe that one of the things that triggers this in genetically vulnerable people is something called gut leakage, where people get an inflamed gut, and so molecules can leak through that normally very fine filter membrane, get into the bloodstream and trigger an immune response. And in genetically vulnerable people, the immune system eventually becomes overwhelmed and gets confused and begins to attack its own tissues. So the medical management approach is to shut down the immune system with drugs like prednisone and methotrexate. And at first, these drugs are like a dream because the pain goes away. But then they become a nightmare because it turns out you need your immune system. And when you
Mm-hmm.
shut down the immune system, you may improve symptoms in one area, but you result in even more serious problems in another. So instead of shutting down the immune system with steroids and powerful drugs, what we do is eliminate the gut leakage through fasting and then stop the formation of the inflammation by getting people off the free radical rich foods and drugs that they've been consuming, the alcohol, the coffee, the recreational drugs, the highly processed, high temperature animal foods, the fried foods, the foods with high oil content cooked at high temperatures, the breads, the crackers, the cookies, the high sugar, high temperature foods in general. So when you get rid of all these heated, beaten, processed, chopped foods, you eliminate a lot of the free radical formation. You get rid of the formation of the gut leakage. And lo and behold, these patients with autoimmune disease are able to manage their condition without the medications. In fact, oftentimes they're in much less distress off all drugs than they ever were on drugs. And you eliminate the long-term consequences of this medication use. So it's not for everybody. It's just for people that actually are serious about getting and staying healthy.
Right, which is would be everybody, should be everybody.
Well, maybe it should be everybody, but it isn't everybody. Not everybody wants to quit smoking or quit drinking or get out of the dietary pleasure trap because they're addicts. They're
Right.
addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain that results in the pleasure response from dopamine and ultimately can lead to addiction. And whether you're addicted to alcohol or coffee or caffeine or the oil, salt, and sugar that's added to your food, the reality is you're an addict. And so when you try to stop it, it can be very difficult. It takes people about a month on a low sodium diet to adapt to low sodium intake. It can take up to 3 months to adapt to a low fat diet. So that is a long period of time to get people to do something they don't want to do. However, with fasting, the way we do it at the True North Health Center, this process can be dramatically sped up. In fact, most patients, by the time they're done going through fasting, realize that good foods actually taste quite good, and that the salty, sugary, oily food that they've been indulging in actually becomes a little bit less desirable. And as a consequence, we can motivate people to make major diet and lifestyle changes and results in not only regaining their health, but hopefully maintaining it over the long term.
Right, it takes a while to actually get used to saltier and more sugary foods. My personal example is that when I arrived to the United States, originally I'm Russian, the desserts were I could not tolerate them. They were unbearable. They were too sweet. I couldn't eat them. In a year, probably, I was starting enjoying them actually in a year.
Sure.
So
Well,
that's it just goes on and on.
and when people smoke cigarettes at first, their body rejects it. But if they just keep assaulting themselves, eventually the body will give up, and then you can become addicted to it. And the
Right.
same is true with these foods. These are not naturally health-promoting foods, but they do dramatically stimulate that pleasure response in your brain, that dopamine response, and as a consequence, your brain gets fooled, and eventually you become caught in the dietary pleasure trap. And that's why 2/3 of people in industrialized countries are overweight or obese. It's so bad now that if you're not fat, you're actually abnormal.
This is crazy. That's true. I'm in Kentucky. We have a lot of unhealthy people here, and
Yeah,
it's going
deep
up.
fried ice cream.
Yeah, that's true. And uh, well, if you are serious about getting healthy, how soon should you start? Or let me rephrase that. Is there too late? Could
Well,
people be too old to start or too young to be fasting?
I mean, I have people that are infants, and I have people, as old as 107. So, the thing is, it's never late to start. But the sooner you start, the less damage is done, the better your outcome's likely to be. And so, for most people that I see, they start when they have no choice. When
Mm-hmm.
the pain becomes so debilitating, the medications don't work anymore. They're facing death or disability, and then they're willing to do something like make diet changes. But the people that get the best results are the people that intellectually realize that health results from healthful living. And so they seek out help on how to apply healthful living habits before they fall apart. So I prefer working with people that want to do prevention. However, most of my patients are people that are here by choice. And I have to say, if you have a life-threatening, debilitating disease where you want to blow your brains out from the pain, sometimes that makes a really good patient because once they get well, they have no choice. They have to comply. Whereas people that have no symptoms often have to do it strictly intellectually, and there's a small percentage of the population that's willing to do that.
It's true. You need to be really motivated to do that. Seems more complicated. Right, you think you can fall back into your habits. And when people come to the True North Center, do you recommend them prepare for fasting somehow? Is there a way they...
Yes. Well, the first thing we recommend people do is go to our website at healthpromoting.com and complete what are called the registration forms. And what these forms do is they ask you a number of questions that gets us your medical history. That automatically comes into our electronic interface, and then a patient can call in and get a free phone consultation with me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is go over their medical history with them and take a look at their situation and determine whether or not some of the approaches that we offer might be helpful, or what they can do that they're not already doing that might move them in the direction of health. And then if they did decide they wanted to undergo a period of fasting at the center, whether it be water fasting, juice fasting, or even just a modified feeding regime, then we would give them instructions on what they could do in preparation so that when they came in, it wouldn't be such an intense and miserable experience. It's much easier to go into a fasting state if you've come off a healthful eating state for days or a week or two prior to fasting. If people can't do that on their own, we'll actually do that for them here. We'll have them come in and we'll do a lead-in diet. And that usually consists of focusing on fresh fruits and vegetables, whether it be raw or cooked, and avoiding the meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, and the highly processed chemicals like oil, salt, and sugar that most people make up the majority of their diet.
Right, in one of your presentations, you have stated that vegetables and fruits are not a significant source of calorie intake for people in the United States, which is hard to believe.
Fruits and vegetables are the decoration on the plate. They don't even make a statistically significant percentage of the diet anymore. It's mostly animal foods and highly processed chemical byproducts and processed foods.
And you can't expect good health from that, absolutely not.
No, what you can't expect is obesity and the diseases of dietary excess, or the diseases of kings, as they used to call it. And that's what we have, an epidemic of heart disease, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases that's debilitating and devastating the population, and they don't even realize it.
No, that's what you get. When people stop fasting, how do they come out of fasting? Is there a certain way people should?
Well, fasting in our clinic will range from 5 to 40 days, and that's really determined based on how the patient responds to the fasting process. Fasting is both diagnostic as well as therapeutic. A lot of times people aren't even absolutely clear on where the problems are, but in fasting, a lot of times the body will reveal where the difficulties lie. Once the fasting process is completed, then we go through a progressive refeeding. It takes at least half the length of the fast. So a 20-day fast, for example, would require at least 10 days of controlled refeeding. We usually start with the juice of fresh organic fruits and vegetables, and then move on to raw fruit and salad material, and then incorporate steamed and starchy vegetables as appropriate for the individual patient. And then by the time we're done, they're on a health-promoting, whole plant food-based diet. We do ask the patients to maintain that diet for 50 years. And then once they've given us a 50-year follow-up and maintain vital health, then they're free to go and do whatever they want after.
That's a great recommendation, 50 years.
I actually just had a patient who came in who was, I saw 30 years ago. He was 55 at the time, and he asked me if he was going to have to do this diet forever. And I said, no, not at all. He just needed to do it till I got my follow-up data, and that we were tracking for 50 years. So after 50 years, he could reevaluate it. And so anyway, I just saw him. It was 30 years since he originally came in. Now he's 85. He said the diet appears to be working. He's been doing it for 30 years. He was coming in just for a checkup. Hadn't seen him in 14 years. He said that all of his friends are dead, and that one of his kids just passed away because they're not doing the diet.
Oh.
And so he was going to keep his word and stick to the diet for another 20 years. But he said after that, he couldn't make any promises.
That is great.
And I'm thinking, gosh, I should have asked for 60 years. That was, at the time, 50 years seemed like such a long time. But it goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, in Russia, we say the first 10 years are difficult, the rest are fine. Yeah, you added a little bit more. First 50 years, that's perfect. Have you ever done a water fast yourself?
Yeah, I do water fasting most every year. And I kind of hate fasting because you have to rest and you can't have any work, and I don't like that. But I do it because it's helpful and I find it useful, but I don't like it.
Right. What was your experience with maybe the first time you've done it? Is it a different experience each time you
It
go
actually
through?
is. I've done fasting since I was 16 years old, periodically. And because I was fortunate enough to get involved in this type of diet and lifestyle early, I mean, I've never smoked a cigarette or had a cup of coffee or had a recreational drug or, haven't had any meat, fish, fowl, eggs, or dairy products since I was a teenager. When I fast, it's a relatively boring experience in the sense that I have exciting healing crises or difficult symptoms. But I don't like the having to rest. But the benefit of that, and I know last time I fasted, it was a very profound experience for me because it changed the way I think and feel. And so, fasting can affect you physically, but it can also affect you emotionally and psychologically and spiritually and in other ways. So, lots of different reasons for fasting. There's a reason that every religious tradition uh, uh, has a tradition of fasting associated with it, whether it's the Jews and the Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians. Everybody's got some version of this fasting experience as part of their tradition. And there's a reason for that, because fasting has a profound effect on how people think and feel, as well as function.
Right, absolutely. And I think there is so much fear involved around telling people they can go without food
Oh my
for
gosh, people get on a plane in New York and they fly to California and they think if they don't eat the peanuts, they'll die somewhere over Colorado from starvation. They think the pretzels saved their life.
absolutely. That's uh, I don't know. We're obsessed with food, and I know the sugar drops. I guess when we get a little bit hungry and we feel very uncomfortable. I know some people who get really aggressive if they haven't had the fix. I guess the food within two,
Yeah,
3, 4 hours.
alcoholics get grumpy when they stop drinking, and cigarette smokers get grumpy when they stop smoking, and cocaine addicts get
Hmm.
antsy when they aren't getting their high, and people that get caught in the dietary pleasure trap respond just like you expect any addict to respond when you withdraw them from their addiction.
Absolutely, and that's sad. At least people recognize that drugs are not a health promoting thing, but with food, people would not admit or talk about it as if they knew that this substance is also
Well, even with
just as
drugs
bad.
like alcohol, you've got the media out there telling people, well, alcohol is good for you. If you don't drink now, you ought to start. Oh, there's Sterol in red wine, so there's a little bit of benefit from the skin of the grapes that wasn't completely destroyed in the winemaking process, and therefore we should compromise our health by taking some 7 calorie per gram highly toxic substance and pretend it's good for us because it has a blood thinning effect. And it's true that alcohol, much like aspirin, has an artifactual blood thinning effect, a pharmacological effect. And if you're on a greasy, slimy, dead, decaying flesh diet and at risk for clotting stroke, thinning your blood may reduce your risk of dying from a clotting stroke. However, what they don't tell you is it may increase your risk from a hemorrhagic or a bleeding stroke, and that there isn't any evidence that all-cause mortality is reduced because of indulging in these health-compromising substances. So I think it's really about time we stop lying to people and start get focused on the fact that health actually results from healthful living, and healthful living has nothing to do with taking drugs, including alcohol.
Absolutely. When people fast, say you said that's from 5 to 40 days. Have you seen the longer they fast, the better the results are, or how is there a correlation between the longer the better, or short and sweet? What?
Well, it's a very individual matter. For some people, it takes a long fast to get the desired effects. For other people, a long fast wouldn't be appropriate or even safe,
Mm-hmm.
and we might have to do several shorter fasts. So you have to match the therapy to the patient. You can't just arbitrarily say everybody needs to go on a very long fast. Sometimes fasting is not appropriate at all. In other cases, as I said, it could be several shorter fasts, or it may require a longer fast in order to get the effect. But in general, the longer you go into fasting, the more profound the changes are.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a point of diminishing return, and part of our job at the True North Health Center in doing medically supervised fasting is to monitor patients, select patients properly, and help them ensure a safe and effective experience. And we've done it 15,000 times over the past 30 years. And so, I'm happy to say that we've proven it can be done safely and effectively.
Right, this is absolutely amazing, and I would encourage people to go and visit your website, which is the healthpromoting.com. There are lots of resources. People can read articles, and they could read about you and see your picture and just realize how wonderful you look because you are living a healthy lifestyle. And this is fantastic. What would you recommend people do who are listening to this podcast today and they have never heard about fasting, or maybe this is the first time they um, listening and realizing that they need to eat healthier? What would be the steps?
I'd say the first thing to do is consider reading our book, The Pleasure Trap, Mastering the Hidden Force That Undermines Health and Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains these principles, and the last third of the book is on fasting in particular. I'd have them go to our website, healthpromoting.com, and look up the articles that we've published, as well as something called True North TV, where they can watch the videos and clips. And then consider registering on our site, submitting their health information, and calling me for a free phone consultation so that I can help them determine what they might be able to do that they're not already doing, which would improve their health. And then, if they decide they do want to undergo something like fasting, we're certainly happy to have them come to the True North Health Center and undergo that process in a controlled and supportive environment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Fasting could save your life, could improve your health. I'm looking forward to maybe one day doing that as well. I haven't done the water fast before. One of those people who are a little bit scared of that, but the more I learn about it,
Why don't you come and you can do your next show podcasting from the center while you're undergoing fasting?
I would love that. I absolutely would love to do
Sounds
that.
great. It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please rate and review it on iTunes. Visit my website, wellnesswithkatia.com, to learn more and subscribe to this podcast. If you have a specific question you would like me to ask a doctor during my next interview, email me at coach@wellnesswithkatia.com. It is Katya for Katya. Thanks.